The weathered cowboy pushed through the rusted gate of the forgotten ranch. When golden eyes emerged from the thicket, a wild girl moving with impossible grace alongside her wolf pack. The townsfolk whisper of the demon child, with hatred and fear, certain she'll be caged or killed like any rabid animal. But this drifting mountain man sees something else entirely in her feral intelligence. As land speculators circle like vultures and the girl's supernatural bond with wildlife threatens to expose buried crimes, two outcasts must choose between safety and truth. Their connection could heal a fractured community or destroy them both when powerful men discover what the girl truly knows about the past. Will civilization's cruelty triumph, or can an unlikely alliance rewrite the rules of justice? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The dust kicked up behind Silas Finnegan's weathered boots as he walked down the Millfield's main street. The sun beat mercilessly on his back. Every face that turned his way carried the same expression of mild curiosity mixed with suspicion. He pushed through the saloon doors. The bartender looked up from wiping glasses. "You the fella asking about the Clearwater Ranch?" Silas nodded. "Heard it might be for sale." A laugh erupted from the corner table where three men sat playing cards. The largest one, wearing a sheriff's badge, shook his head. "Mister, that place has been cursed for 15 years. No one's lived there since the Troubles." "What kind of troubles?" Silas asked. The bartender leaned forward. "Strange things happen out there. Animals acting peculiar. Folks see things that ain't natural." A well-dressed man at the bar turned around. His eyes were sharp and calculating. "Name's Eli Rutledge. I handle most property deals in these parts." He extended a manicured hand. "That land's been nothing but problems. Wild animals, unstable ground, not fit for decent folks." Silas shook the offered hand. "I'm not looking for decent, just quiet." Rutledge's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, it's quiet all right. Question is whether you'll stay quiet once you hear the howling at night." The sheriff stood up and approached. Roderick Walsh. His handshake was firm, but brief. "You seem like a reasonable man. Take my advice and look elsewhere. That area's got a reputation." "What kind of reputation?" Walsh glanced at Rutledge before continuing. "Local folks talk about a demon child roaming with wolf packs. Probably just stories. But stories keep people away." Silas pulled out a small leather pouch. "How much for the ranch?" Rutledge's eyebrows shot up. "You're serious about this?" "Dead serious. $200, cash." The amount was suspiciously low. Silas had seen similar properties go for 3 times that price. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Rutledge said quickly. "Just eager to get it off the books." Silas counted out the bills. Something about Rutledge's eagerness felt wrong, but he needed isolation more than he needed answers. 3 days later, Silas stood at the entrance to Clearwater Ranch. The gate hung crooked on rusted hinges. Weeds choked the path leading to a run-down farmhouse. The barn leaned at an angle that defied basic engineering. He pushed the gate open. It groaned in protest. The house was worse inside than out. Broken furniture covered in dust. Windows so dirty they barely let in light. But it had 4 walls and a roof. That was enough. Silas spent the first week making basic repairs. The well still worked. The stove could be cleaned. The barn needed serious attention, but it wasn't beyond saving. On the 8th morning, he started work on the barn's foundation. The sun had barely risen when he heard it. A low growling sound coming from the tree line. He looked up from his shovel. Nothing visible, just shadows between the pine trees. The growling stopped. Silas went back to digging. 20 minutes later, he heard it again. Closer this time. He straightened up slowly. His hand moved instinctively toward the rifle leaning against the barn wall. Movement caught his eye. a flash of gray between the trees, then another. Wolves. But something else moved with them, something that walked upright but dropped to all fours when it thought he wasn't looking. Silas squinted against the morning sun. The figure was small, human-sized. It moved with the fluid grace of a predator but had the unmistakable shape of a person, a young woman. She crept closer, staying low to the ground. Her skin was dark, her hair wild and matted. She wore tattered remnants of what might once have been a dress, now more animal hide than fabric. Their eyes met across 30 yards of open ground. She froze. He froze. The wolves flanking her tensed, ready to attack or flee, depending on her signal. Silas slowly raised his empty hands, showing he meant no harm. The girl tilted her head, studying him with eyes that seemed far too intelligent for someone living wild in the forest. Then she was gone. In the space of a heartbeat, she had melted back into the shadows with her pack. Only the faint sound of paws on pine needles proved she had been there at all. Silas stood motionless for several minutes, processing what he had seen. The demon child from the stories was real, and she was no demon. She was just a girl. That evening he sat on his porch as darkness fell. He had deliberately left food scraps near the tree line, not as bait, but as an offering. The scraps were gone by morning. 2 days passed without another sighting. On the third day, she returned. This time she was alone. She approached within 20 feet of where he worked, moving with cautious curiosity rather than fear. Silas continued repairing the barn roof, pretending not to notice her, but he spoke softly, more to himself than to her. "Lot of work to do around here. Could use some help." She didn't respond, but she didn't flee either. Progress. The girl returned every morning for a week. Each day she crept closer. Each day Silas pretended not to notice while continuing his work. On the 8th day, she limped. Blood stained her left leg where metal teeth had bitten deep. A trap, meant for wolves, had found different prey. Silas set down his hammer. "You're hurt." She backed away, favoring the injured leg. Her eyes darted between him and the forest behind her. He moved slowly to the porch. From a wooden box, he retrieved clean cloth and a bottle of whiskey. "I'm not going to hurt you." She watched his every movement. When he took a step forward, she took a step back. Silas sat down on the ground. He placed the medical supplies beside him and waited. Minutes passed. The girl's breathing was labored. The wound needed attention soon or infection would set in. Finally, she approached. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to see what he offered. Silas tore the cloth into strips. He soaked one piece with whiskey and held it up. "This will clean it." She understood more than she let on. Her eyes showed intelligence beyond her wild appearance. Slowly, carefully, she extended her wounded leg. The trap had done serious damage. 4 puncture wounds formed a neat line above her ankle. Silas cleaned each one methodically. She never made a sound, though he could see the pain in her clenched jaw. "What's your name, Itori?" "Intra-things Tom." "Ultrail." Wrapping the bandage, she tilted her head like a confused animal. I'm Silas." No response. He finished the bandaging and sat back. "There, that should help." She examined his work with curious fingers. Then she looked at him with something that might have been gratitude. The next morning brought visitors. 2 hawks circled overhead, crying out in sharp calls. The girl appeared at the forest edge, listening intently to their sounds. She ran towards the house with urgent purpose. Her bandaged leg barely slowed her down. "Rider's coming," she said. The words were clear despite years of disuse. Silas stared at her in surprise. "You can talk." "Some." Her voice was rough from lack of practice. "Men. Coming fast." Silas looked toward the main road. Nothing visible yet, but he trusted her warning. "How do you know?" She pointed at the hawks. "They tell me." Before he could ask what that meant, the sound of hoofbeats reached his ears. 4 men rode hard toward the ranch. Sheriff Walsh led the group. Behind him rode Rutledge and 2 deputies. The girl melted back into the forest without a sound. Walsh reined in his horse near the porch. "Morning, Silas. Heard you might be having some trouble out here." "What kind of trouble?" Rutledge dismounted and surveyed the property with calculating eyes. "The kind that could get a man killed if he's not careful." "Seen any unusual activity?" Walsh asked. "Strange animals? Things that don't belong?" Silas kept his expression neutral. "Just the usual wildlife." "The usual wildlife doesn't leave human footprints near chicken coops 20 miles south," one deputy said. Walsh studied Silas's face for tells. "Something's been raiding farms, taking livestock, frightening decent folks. And you think it's connected to my ranch?" Rutledge stepped closer. "Your ranch sits right in the middle of the trouble zone. Coincidence makes me nervous." "Maybe you bought more than you bargained for," Walsh suggested. Silas met their stares without flinching. "I'll keep an eye out." After they left, the girl emerged from hiding. She had heard everything. "They hunt me." "Why?" "I am different." That afternoon, she began to show him just how different. A family of deer approached the ranch. Instead of fleeing at the sight of humans, they walked directly to where the girl sat. She spoke to them in a language of soft clicks and low humming sounds. The largest buck lowered his head and allowed her to stroke his neck. "How is this possible?" Silas whispered. "I grew up with them, learned their words." A red squirrel chittered angrily from an oak tree. The girl listened carefully to its rapid speech. "Storm coming tonight. Big one." Silas looked at the cloudless sky. "How can you know that?" "Animals know before humans. They prepare first." By evening, dark clouds rolled in from the west. Lightning split the sky. Rain hammered the roof with violent intensity. The storm raged for 6 hours. At dawn, Silas found tree branches scattered across his property. A section of fence lay flattened, but his animals were unharmed. They had somehow known to seek shelter before the worst hit. The girl sat on his porch, completely dry despite the chaos of the night. "You warned them too." She nodded. "All creatures deserve protection." Over the following days, she demonstrated abilities that defied explanation. Birds learned messages about distant events. A bear cub led them to a hidden spring with the sweetest water Silas had ever tasted. Even insects seemed to respond to her gentle commands. "Where did you learn this?" he asked. "I was 5 when my family died. Winter storm. Wolves found me freezing." Her broken sentences painted a tragic picture. Parents lost to cold and hunger. A child raised by creatures who showed more kindness than most humans. "The pack taught me to survive, to listen, to understand," she demonstrated by calling to a hawk circling overhead. The bird descended and perched on her outstretched arm. "What does he tell you?" "Men in town plan to capture me. They fear what they do not understand." The hawk took flight, disappearing toward Millfield with an urgent cry. Silas felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. This girl possessed gifts beyond anything he had imagined. In the wrong hands, those gifts could be exploited or destroyed. In the right hands, they could change everything. Rutledge paced around his office like a caged animal. Maps covered his desk, marked with red circles and calculated measurements. The mineral surveys he had secretly conducted years ago showed veins of silver running beneath Clearwater Ranch, silver worth more than the entire town of Millfield. He had waited 15 years for the right moment to claim that land. Now, some drifter and a wild girl threatened everything. Walsh knocked and entered without waiting for permission. "The men are asking questions about hunting a human being." "She's hardly human," Rutledge snapped. "She's a menace to public safety." Some folks are starting to wonder why you're so eager to solve this particular problem. Rutledge fixed the sheriff with a cold stare. Because I care about this community. Something you seem to have forgotten. Walsh shifted uncomfortably. He remembered the last time Rutledge had cared about community problems. The Washington family had disappeared that winter, and Rutledge had been quick to claim their abandoned property for back taxes. Form a hunting party, Rutledge ordered. Tell them the girl has been stealing livestock and threatening children. Has she? Does it matter? Fear is fear. Walsh, use it. At the ranch, Silas found the girl studying old papers in the dusty farmhouse. She had discovered a wooden box hidden beneath loose floorboards. These were my family's, she said quietly. Faded photographs showed a proud black family standing before the very house where they now sat. A land deed bore the signature of Joshua Washington, dated 1858. Washington, Silas read aloud. That's your family name, Jasira Washington. Speaking her full name seemed to strengthen her somehow. Silas examined the deed carefully. According to the document, the Washington family had legally purchased 640 acres, including mineral and water rights. This land belongs to you. Belonged, she corrected. My family is gone. But you're still here. That makes you the rightful owner. Jasira stared at the deed as if seeing it for the first time. Can papers matter after so long? Before Silas could answer, a murder of crows erupted from the trees in harsh alarm calls. Jasira listened to their frantic cries with growing concern. Many men coming, horses and guns. Silas grabbed his rifle and peered through the window. 8 riders approached in formation. They carried rope and iron cages meant for capturing dangerous animals. They mean to take you. I will not be caged. Jasira's voice carried the fierce determination of a wild creature protecting its territory. Then we run. No more running. She stepped onto the porch as the hunting party surrounded the house. Silas moved beside her, rifle ready but not yet aimed. Walsh rode at the front, his face grim with reluctant duty. Miss, you need to come with us for your own safety. Whose safety? Silas challenged. Rutledge spurred his horse forward. This creature has been terrorizing honest folks for months. It ends today. She has a name, Silas said. Jasira Washington, and this is her land. Her land? Rutledge's laugh was sharp and bitter. That family abandoned this property years ago. Legal ownership reverted to the county. Silas held up the deed. This document says otherwise. That paper's worthless. The Washingtons died in the wilderness like animals. Jasira stepped forward, her eyes blazing with sudden fury. My parents died because they were driven from their home in winter, left to freeze while cruel men stole what they built. Prove it, Rutledge snarled. The surrounding forest exploded with movement. Wolves emerged from every direction, forming a protective circle around Jasira. Their eyes reflected deadly intelligence and unwavering loyalty. The hunting party's horses reared and whinnied in terror. 2 men were thrown from their saddles as their mounts bolted. Call them off, Walsh shouted, fighting to control his panicked horse. Jasira raised her hand. The wolves stopped advancing, but remained poised to attack. You fear me because I am different, she said. Because I survived when you wanted me dead. A golden eagle swooped low over the hunting party, its cry echoing across the valley. Within minutes, the sky filled with birds of every species. They circled overhead in a living storm of wings and calls. Rutledge's horse bucked violently, throwing him to the ground. This is witchcraft. This is nature, Jasira replied. Something you forgot how to understand. The remaining hunters struggled to maintain formation as their horses fought against pure animal instinct. Every creature in the forest had answered Jasira's call. Bears emerged from the tree line. Deer bounded into the clearing. Even small creatures like rabbits and squirrels gathered at the edges, creating an army of wildlife that vastly outnumbered the human intruders. "She's not just talking to them," one deputy whispered in amazement. "She's commanding them." Silas watched in stunned silence as Jasira demonstrated power beyond anything he had imagined. She was not simply communicating with animals. She was their acknowledged leader. Walsh slowly dismounted, his hands visible and empty. "What do you want?" "To be left in peace on my family's land." "And if we refuse?" Jasira looked at the assembled creatures surrounding them. Hundreds of animals awaited her command. "Then you will learn that nature has more patience for justice than humans do." The largest wolf padded forward until it stood beside her, its yellow eyes fixed on Rutledge with unmistakable intelligence and contempt. "This ends now," Walsh declared. "We're leaving." But as the hunting party prepared to retreat, Rutledge grabbed a fallen rifle, his face twisted with desperate rage. "I won't be threatened by some wild animal." The shot echoed across the valley. Jasira crumpled to the ground. The bullet grazed Jasira's shoulder, spinning her to the ground. Blood seeped through her makeshift clothing as she struggled to rise. The forest erupted in fury. Every wolf, bear, and bird launched toward Rutledge with deadly intent. He scrambled backward, dropping the rifle as claws and fangs closed in around him. "Stop!" Jasira's voice cut through the chaos. The animals froze mid-attack. Rutledge lay cowering beneath a massive grizzly bear whose claws hovered inches from his throat. "No killing," she whispered, clutching her wounded shoulder. "We are not like them." The bear slowly backed away. The wolves formed a tight circle around Rutledge, but did not strike. Even wounded, Jasira commanded absolute loyalty from creatures that could have torn apart the entire hunting party. Walsh stared in amazement. "She saved your life, Eli." Rutledge's face burned with humiliation and rage. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Walsh's voice carried new authority. "You just shot an unarmed woman on her own property. You're under arrest." "You can't be serious." "Deadly serious." Walsh dismounted and approached Rutledge with iron shackles. "Should have done this years ago." Silas knelt beside Jasira, examining her wound. The bullet had carved a shallow groove across her shoulder blade. Painful, but not life-threatening. "Can you ride?" She nodded weakly. The cave. Safe there. Within an hour, half of Millfield had gathered in the town square. Word spread quickly about the confrontation at Clearwater Ranch. Stories grew wilder with each telling. Rutledge sat in the jail cell, his expensive clothes torn and dirty. His carefully maintained image of respectability had crumbled in a single afternoon. "The whole town will hear about this," he threatened through the bars. Walsh ignored him and turned to address the growing crowd outside. "Folks, I need to explain what happened today." "Is it true she commands wild animals?" someone called out. "Is she dangerous?" another voice added. "She's remarkable," Walsh replied honestly. "And she's been wronged by people who should have protected her." But fear had already taken root. By evening, 3 families had packed their belongings and left town. Others barricaded their doors and loaded their weapons. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to the jail. Dr. Margaret Henley had traveled from the territorial capital to investigate reports of unusual animal behavior. She was a slight woman with intelligent eyes and an academic's curiosity. "I'd like to meet this young woman," she told Walsh. "She's hiding in the wilderness. Can't say I blame her after yesterday." "Perhaps I could help. I've studied similar cases in other territories." Walsh raised an eyebrow. "Similar cases?" "Humans raised by animals aren't as rare as people think. Usually they're damaged by the experience. But occasionally, very occasionally, they develop extraordinary abilities. That afternoon, Dr. Henley accompanied Walsh and Silas to the hidden cave where Jasira had taken refuge. The entrance was nearly invisible, concealed behind a waterfall and thick vegetation. Jasira emerged slowly, her shoulder bandaged but her eyes alert. 3 wolves flanked her like loyal guards. "Miss Washington," Dr. Henley said gently, "I'm here to help." "Help with what?" "Understanding what makes you special. And proving to others that you're not a threat." Jasira studied the older woman carefully. "You are different from the others. I'm a scientist. I study the natural world just like you do." Over the next 3 days, Dr. Henley observed Jasira's interactions with local wildlife. She documented everything in detailed notes that would later astonish the scientific community. Jasira could predict weather patterns by interpreting bird migration routes. She located underground water sources by following the movement of certain insects. Her understanding of animal behavior surpassed anything Dr. Henley had encountered in 20 years of study. "How do you know when the deer are sick?" the doctor asked. "Their scent changes. Their movements become uncertain. The other animals avoid them until the sickness passes. And you can smell these changes? After many years with the wolves, yes. Human senses become stronger when they must." Dr. Henley filled pages with observations. This was not witchcraft or supernatural power. This was a human being who had adapted to wilderness survival in ways that most people considered impossible. Meanwhile, Rutledge's supporters in town grew increasingly vocal. They demanded his release and called for armed action against the monster in the forest. "She's not natural," declared Mrs. Pemberton, the banker's wife. "Decent folks shouldn't have to live in fear." "Fear of what?" asked Tom Miller, the blacksmith. "She's never hurt anyone. She controls wild beasts. That's the devil's work." The town split into 2 camps. Those who had witnessed Jasira's gentle nature defended her. Those who had only heard stories demanded her removal. Rutledge fed the flames from his jail cell, telling visitors that Jasira was merely the first sign of greater dangers to come. "Mark my words," he whispered to his supporters. "More of her kind will follow. This town will be overrun if we don't act." On the 4th day, Dr. Henley made a disturbing discovery while researching property records in the courthouse basement. Hidden among dusty files, she found documents that painted a very different picture of the Washington family's disappearance. Sheriff reports from 15 years earlier showed a pattern of harassment and intimidation directed at the black farming families in the area. Complaints had been filed about threats, stolen livestock, and damaged crops. All of the complaints had been dismissed by the sheriff at that time. The sheriff named on every report was Eli Rutledge. Dr. Henley spread the damning documents across Walsh's desk. 15 years of systematic harassment documented in fading ink, report after report filed by black families, all dismissed, without investigation. "Every complaint was signed off by Sheriff Rutledge," she said quietly. Walsh studied the papers with growing horror. He drove them out, deliberately. And when the Washington family fled into the wilderness during that harsh winter, he made sure no rescue party was organized. The final document was a property seizure notice dated just 3 months after the family's disappearance. Rutledge had claimed their land for unpaid taxes, despite their mortgage being current. He planned the thermosine ein from a sorfram. Through at the beginning of Vitor Sononi, Walsh realized. "Murder by neglect. The mineral surveys are here too, Doctor." Henley pointed to detailed geological reports, all conducted under his authority as sheriff. He knew about the silver deposits before he forced them out. Walsh felt sick. He had served under Rutledge for 2 years before the man moved into land speculation. All those times he had wondered why certain cases never got proper attention. We need to show this to the territorial judge. First, we need to tell Jasira the truth about her family. They found her at the ranch, teaching a group of children from town how to read animal tracks. Word had spread about her abilities, and curious families had begun visiting despite the controversy. "The rabbits make these prints," she explained to 8-year-old Sally Morrison. "See how the back feet land in front? That means they were moving fast." "Were they scared?" Sally asked, number playing. "When scared, the prints are deeper and farther apart." Silas watched from the porch, amazed at how naturally Jasira interacted with the children. They showed no fear of her wildness, only fascination with her knowledge. Dr. Henley approached carefully. "Jasira, we need to discuss what really happened to your family." The children were quickly sent home. Jasira sat on the porch steps, her face grave, as the doctor explained the documents they had discovered. "Rutledge was the sheriff who forced your parents into the wilderness." Jasira's hands clenched into fists. "He killed them." "Yes." "And then he stole your land to mine the silver beneath it." "The silver he knew was there all along," Walsh added. "That's why he's so desperate to get rid of you now. You're the rightful owner of a fortune." Jasira stood and walked to the edge of the porch. A red hawk circled overhead, calling out in sharp cries. "The birds tell me armed men are gathering in town. More than before." Walsh cursed under his breath. "Rutledge's friends are planning something. They want to finish what he started," Silas said grimly. That evening, Mayor Davidson called an emergency town meeting. The church was packed beyond capacity, with angry voices filling the air before the proceedings even began. "This has gone far enough," Davidson declared. "We have a situation that threatens the peace and safety of our community." "That girl needs to be removed," shouted Mrs. Pemberton. "Decent folk shouldn't have to live in fear." Dr. Henley stood up. "I've spent a week studying Miss Washington. She poses no threat to anyone. She controls wild animals. She communicates with them. There's a significant difference." Tom Miller rose from his seat near the back. "My boy Jimmy visited her ranch yesterday. Came home talking about how she taught him to identify poisonous plants. Knowledge that might save his life someday." "Witchcraft," someone yelled. "Education," Dr. Henley corrected firmly. "Miss Washington possesses knowledge that could benefit this entire community. She can predict weather patterns, locate water sources, and identify crop diseases before they spread." Walsh stepped forward with the historical documents. "There's something else you all need to know about Jasira Washington and her family." He read aloud from the sheriff reports, detailing years of harassment and intimidation. The room grew quieter as the ugly truth emerged. "Eli Rutledge systematically drove black families from their legally owned land," Walsh continued. "The Washington family died because they were forced into the wilderness during a brutal winter." Murmurs of shock rippled through the crowd. "And then he claimed their property for back taxes, knowing it contained valuable mineral deposits." "That's impossible," Mrs. Pemberton protested. "Mr. Rutledge is a respected businessman." "Mr. Rutledge is a murderer and a thief," Dr. Henley stated bluntly. Mayor Davidson examined the documents with trembling hands. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. "If this is true, then Miss Washington is the legal owner of Clearwater Ranch and all mineral rights associated with it." The implications hit the room like a thunderbolt. Several of Rutledge's business associates suddenly looked very uncomfortable. "She's still dangerous," a voice called out from the crowd. "The only danger she poses is to those who profit from injustice," Walsh replied. Dr. Henley stood again. "I propose we invite Miss Washington to demonstrate her abilities. Let her show you what she can do for this community instead of living in fear of what you think she might do. And if we refuse, asked Davidson. Silas spoke for the first time that evening. Then you'll be no better than the men who murdered her family 15 years ago. The room fell silent. Outside, thunder rumbled across the sky as storm clouds gathered. Through the church windows they could see birds fleeing toward shelter with unusual urgency. "Storm coming," old Pete Henderson observed. "Animals always know first." Mayor Davidson looked around the packed church. All in favor of inviting Miss Washington to address this community? Hands rose slowly throughout the room. Not everyone voted yes, but enough to carry the motion. "Meeting adjourned. We'll reconvene tomorrow evening." As people filed out into the approaching storm, nobody noticed the figure watching from the jail window. Rutledge's face twisted with rage as his carefully constructed empire began to crumble. The church was packed the following evening. Jasira stood at the front, wearing a simple dress that Silas had purchased in town. Her hair was clean and braided, but she still moved with the fluid grace of someone more comfortable in the wilderness than among people. Dr. Henley addressed the crowd first. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present Miss Jasira Washington, rightful owner of Clearwater Ranch and possessor of knowledge that could transform this community." Skeptical murmurs filled the air. Many faces showed open hostility. Mayor Davidson stepped forward. "Miss Washington, these people have concerns about your presence in our area. Perhaps you could address them." Jasira looked out at the sea of suspicious faces. "You fear me because I am different, because I survived when you believed I should die." "Can you really control wild animals?" asked Tom Miller. "I do not control them. I speak with them. There is a difference." Mrs. Pemberton stood up indignantly. "That's impossible. Animals don't have language." "Every creature has language. You simply choose not to listen." To demonstrate, Jasira stepped to the open church window and made a series of soft clicking sounds. Within moments, a barn owl landed on the windowsill. The crowd gasped as the bird tilted its head and responded with gentle hoots. Jasira listened intently, then turned back to the audience. "He tells me that mice have been destroying grain in the Henderson barn, the northeast corner behind the old plow." Old Pete Henderson's jaw dropped. "How could you possibly know that?" "Owls hunt mice. They know where the largest populations gather." "Is it true?" Mayor Davidson asked Henderson. "Well, I have been losing grain from somewhere. Haven't been able to figure out where." Jasira made another series of sounds. "The owl hooted once and flew away. He will hunt in your barn tonight. By morning, your mouse problem will be greatly reduced." Dr. Henley smiled at the crowd's amazed faces. "Miss Washington can predict weather patterns, locate water sources, and identify plant diseases before they become visible to human observation." "Prove it," challenged Mrs. Pemberton. Jasira walked to the window again and listened to the evening sounds. "Rain will begin in 2 hours. Heavy rain. It will continue for 3 days." The sky outside was perfectly clear. "Your corn crop has blight starting in the western fields," she continued, addressing Farmer Jack Sullivan. "The crows have been avoiding those areas for 5 days." Sullivan frowned. "My corn looks fine. The disease starts in the roots. By the time human eyes see it, half the crop is lost. And you know this because birds told you?" "Birds know which insects are healthy and which carry disease. Sick insects come from sick plants." Mayor Davidson studied the young woman with growing respect. "If this is true, your knowledge could save us thousands of dollars in lost crops." "My knowledge belongs to this land. It has always been here. You simply forgot how to see it." Walsh stood up from the back of the room. "There's one more thing you all need to hear." He held up a document bearing the territorial judge's official seal. "This morning, Judge Morrison reviewed all evidence regarding the Washington family property. Miss Jasira Washington is hereby recognized as the legal owner of 640 acres, including all mineral rights. The room erupted in shot conversations. Furthermore, Walsh continued, Eli Rutledge has been charged with fraud, theft, and conspiracy in the deaths of the Washington family. Several of Rutledge's business associates quietly slipped out of the church. Dr. Henley addressed the crowd again. Miss Washington has a proposition for this community. Jasira stepped forward. I propose to establish a school, not for reading and writing, though those are important. A school for understanding the natural world. What kind of school? Asked Davidson. I will teach farmers to read the signs that predict drought or flood. I will show parents which plants heal and which harm. I will help hunters track game without depleting the herds. Tom Miller raised his hand. What do you want in return? Acceptance. A place in the community my family helped build. And the silver? Under your land? Someone called out. The silver will be mined responsibly. Profits will support the school and benefit the entire town. Mrs. Pemberton stood up reluctantly. I suppose such knowledge might be useful. Then you accept me? The room fell silent as people considered the offer. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall. Just as Jasira had predicted, Mayor Davidson called for a vote. All in favor of welcoming Miss Washington as a member of our community. Hands rose throughout the church, not every hand, but a clear majority. Motion carried. Welcome home, Miss Washington. 6 months later, the Washington School of Natural Sciences had 20 regular students and twice as many occasional visitors. Jasira taught from a classroom built beside the restored ranch house. Silas served as her business manager and guardian, helping navigate the legal complexities of land ownership and silver mining operations. The mine employed half the men in Millfield, operating under strict environmental guidelines that Jasira insisted upon. Dr. Henley had returned east to write a book about her discoveries, but she corresponded regularly with her prize student. On warm evenings, children from town would gather on the ranch porch to hear Jasira tell stories about life in the wilderness. Parents came too, amazed by the practical knowledge their children absorbed. The raccoons are washing their food because the stream is muddy, 10-year-old Sally Morrison announced proudly. That means heavy rain, upstream. Jasira smiled and nodded approvingly. And what should we do with that information? Check the lower fields for flooding risk. Very good. As the sun set over Clearwater Ranch, wolves emerged from the forest to drink from the stream. The townspeople no longer feared them. Under Jasira's guidance, they had learned to coexist. Silas watched from the porch as his unlikely partner taught another lesson in survival and understanding. The wild girl and the lonely cowboy had found something neither had expected. They had found home.